So I just want to introduce Jake. I think everyone here knows him pretty well. He's now heading our development for Cobalt in many ways, in many fronts. So we count on Jake for just about everything. He's our firefighter in the company, and he helps with product development and product marketing extensively. So he's going to be presenting today. So thank you so much, Jake, for doing this one more time for us. We try to have a webinar at least twice a year, pre-NAB and pre-IBC. So this is a good chance for everyone to catch up with new functionality and new products, for the two big shows. And we are planning to release a new price list a week or two after IBC. So that's going to include all the new products and new options for all products. So that should be on there. Thank you so much for attending. We will make this available as soon as, sometime later today when the session is over. And so you can distribute to other team members and a lot of other partners that couldn't make it today. So thank you so much for being with us. And if you are attending IBC next week, would you please send us a quick note or send a message on the chat box? We just want to make sure we know all the partners that will be at IBC next week up front. But thank you so much again, and I'll leave it with Jake. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you everyone for your attendance. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them at the appropriate time. So this is the Cobalt Digital pre-IBC webinar. If you are going to IBC on this call, just to give you an idea of where we're located, we're in Hall 10, booth or stand B44, located at that blue dot here. Just a real basic overview of the Cobalt Digital product lines. We have the OpenGear platform, which is our primary card base, product base. So most of our solutions fit into this platform that you'll find in the presentation today. Many of those cards can also be transitioned into the BBG 1000 standalone system, which is the unit over here on the left. Everything is controlled in DashBoard, which is the common control structure across the OpenGear partnership. But we also have an introductory line called the Blue Box, which are small standalone converters that can be powered and have some control, but mostly they're just set and forget type of boxes. We also have a number of different products called Elements and SpotCheck, which are more server-based products for audio loudness compression and also monitoring. The OpenGear platform also has a number of software-based options that are available on the hardware-based cards that really make our products software-defined in terms of their functionality. So the Blue Box, this is kind of the starting kit into the Cobalt Digital universe. They're manufactured in the US. They have a 5-year warranty. We have a 20-year track record, 20-plus-year track record. These boxes have been on space shuttles. They've been in the Olympics. They're tried and tested. We have a number of them from anywhere from fiber conversion to analog to digital, embedding, disembedding. So take some time. You can peruse through this list on our website. We also have a tray enclosure for these units. So the black tray there you see is a 1RU tray. Fits in a 19-inch rack. And then we have sleds, these metal sleds that slide into this tray that you can securely bolt these down. And these have gone in airplanes and submarines and helicopters and all sorts of places. Then we get into our OpenGear terminal gear platform. So the OpenGear frame and our HPF 9000 frame, those each hold 20 cards. The networking card doesn't take up a slot and neither does the reference. Power is redundant on each side and also hot swappable. You can remove them while the unit is operating and everything will continue to function at least one at a time, as long as one power supply is in the frame. So this makes it easy to service. The cards are also hot swappable. You can take them in and out. One of the unique things about Cobalt is that we have a variety of input-output modules for our card that gives the users a lot of choice. So you can optimize for density or you can optimize for functionality, but we have a wide range of connectors available. So in terms of the different functions and features you can find within our product portfolio, they're listed out on this slide. So we're well known for our audio processing. We use Dolby and also linear acoustic audio loudness processing. We're also able to do 5.1 to 2.0 down mix and 5.1 to 2.0 up mix, so that you have a level sound floor at the end. We have a very fast and responsive color corrector that has been used widely throughout live production. Conversion is one of the areas that we rest our hat in. We do anything from resolution, high frame rate, HDR. We're into 2110. So any type of conversion type products, that's one of our strong suits. Distribution of signals. So any kind of digital or analog signals, MADI, word clock, we do most everything. Embedding, disembedding into embedded and also discrete audio channels. Fiber optics. So we have a growing portfolio of fiber optic products that can take 1310 or CWDM wavelengths and transmit signals to and from. We also have frame synchronizers, so glitchless frame synchronizers, so that you can use these on air with high confidence. And they are used on air in many stations across the globe. Compression has been a growing part of our business through a key acquisition a few years back. And so now we have MPEG-4 encoders, decoders, MPEG-2 as well, gateway products, transcoding products, and we'll get more into what we've done with that recently. Branding, so we do some keying and logo insertion, text crawl for EAS, and also text-to-speech. Metadata insertion, so we can trigger our different functions based on SCSI triggers or Ethernet triggers. We can also take those and pass them through even when we're doing conversions. Multi-view, so we have a wide line of multi-view products. We have a 5-input multi-viewer, and we just came out with an 18-input multi-viewer, and we'll get into that a little bit more, all for the OpenGear platform. Routing, we have up to a 24 by 24 router in the OpenGear platform, which people find very useful. We also have test and reference, so if you're looking for generating test signals or reference either blackburst or tri-level word clock, we have those tools. Compliance, we talked a little bit about the audio leveling and the speech to text, the EAS. For master control, we really have the one-stop shop. And then, of course, key features like 12 gig SDI or 4K. We're very heavily invested in those platforms. So just a little difference here between the OGX and the HPF frame. There's a few different parts for ordering, but everything you'd like, you can order as a separate feature. And then the BBG 1000 series, you'll see a lot of those same functions that we just talked about brought forth to this platform. The platform has dual reference and Ethernet and also 2 power supplies so that you can have redundancy. They are DC power supplies, and they fit in the same tray that the BBG Blue Box group fit into. So now we're going to get into some of the new releases that we're going to be showing here at IBC, starting with our compression line. As you may have known if you're following our product, we have already released an encoder, 4K HEVC capable encoder. that by itself is a perfect streaming solution for OTT and allows you to publish to multiple destinations from the one card. And now at NAB, we're also going, the licensing for that, it's up to a 4-channel card. You can license it all the way to 4K or a single channel. So when I talk about software defined, you can have the hardware platform at a single channel with just 2 audio groups, and then license it all the way up to a multi-channel or 4K product, within that software. So at IBC, rather, we'll be releasing our new decoder card, 4K decoder companion to the encoder card. So this provides us a true point-to-point delivery system for 4K video and also 2K or smaller resolutions using either AVC or now HEVC. So the benefit of that would be you can fit more into a smaller link, whether that's more video resolution or more channels, or just simply save on bandwidth. You can now do that with the pairing of these 2 cards. We simultaneously output ASI and IP on the backplane. That can go over the public internet. Cobalt Digital has been a leader in the RIST initiative. RIST stands for Reliable Internet Stream Transport, and that's a protocol that allows you to send data reliably, specifically audio and video data, over the open internet. So digging in a little bit more to the licensing model for the decoder. The decoder is capable of 2 channels, either 2 2K channels or 1 4K channel. So the base card comes with a single channel of AVC, and then HEVC is a licensable upgrade. Unlike the encoder, which comes with 2 audio pairs, the decoder will come with 4 audio pairs, so 8 channels of audio transport natively. And then you get another 8 channels. These are floating licenses that can be applied to either decoder when you get a second decode channel. If you want to order the decoder initially, you can just order the 9992-2 DEC. Or again, you can order the top level 9992-DEC-4K-HEVC to get all the options. There are also per unit options where you can order forward error correction or FEC or the RIST option for the decoder. We can also license on from our old platform what we call our DEC RTMP SVR. That stands for server. So this card can act as an RTMP server to receive signals from the internet. And then in terms of total audio channels, the card as a whole can hold up to 16 audio PIDs or 32 audio channels. And again, those are floating licenses that can be applied to either channel. So to talk a little bit more about RIST, in October of 2018, the simple profile was published by the VSF, which is an independent group in the industry, the broadcast industry, looking to promote technologies for the betterment of both end users, vendors, and service providers. So the basic premise behind RIST is it provides a low latency yet high reliable way to transport content over the open internet. Standards like FEC or forward error correction add a lot of overhead, which is detrimental to low or bandwidth situations. So the way that RIST works and gets around sending the bandwidth is that it only sends the packets that are lost instead of sending all the overhead at once. And so as it's needed, packets are sent, and there's a buffer in the decoder that allows the ability to ask or request those packets from the encoder. The encoder will then resend the packets, and that can happen as many times as necessary for the link. So in practice, your latency is 2 times the length times however many times you are doing this process. It could be as little as tens of milliseconds, or it could be a few seconds, depending on the buffer size of the decoder. But this provides up to 50% packet recovery in some instances in unreliable links. The simple profile also provides some additional features like bonding or hitless packet switching. So you can basically go over two different networks and receive packets on the decode end seamlessly from two separate encoders. Coming up at IBC, there's going to be some more talk around the RIST main profile, with the likelihood of there being a new recommended practice for the RIST main profile shortly after IBC. And some of the targeted developments, one of the most interesting ones is stream encryption. So that'll allow people to protect data as it goes over this public internet, which is a large benefit for wide adoption. And also the ability to do point to multi-point services. So you can distribute, for example, if you're a network, from one source to all the affiliates. There's also going to be VPN tunneling, which will help to bypass some of the safeguards and firewalls while still providing for secure communications. And that's not just video communications, but it could also be data communications. So control could be sent over this link as well as the video and audio. So that's something that IT departments will greatly appreciate. Also some more concrete NAT traversal, null packet suppression. So what the null packet suppression will do is it will basically reduce the bandwidth of your links so that any overhead incurred by the RIST protocol will be negated. So you get the protection of RIST for free, in essence, without any trade-offs. And then high transport of streams. This opens up the way to do things like SMPTE 2110 or uncompressed video feeds. There is a limitation on the amount of delay you can put into this and the number of retries, but basically it could make 2110 or uncompressed feeds more reliable over the internet. So one of the first new products, besides the decoder we're getting to here, that we're just showing at IBC is the product we call SafeLink. So SafeLink is a gateway solution that protects the stream from point to point, and it can wrap around legacy equipment that's not RIST compliant. So without having to go and buy new hardware necessarily, you could use these products to wrap around your current facility in a phased approach as you're looking to become more reliable. On top of that, this is part of the OpenGear platform, so it fits nicely into your OpenGear frames. There's no annual fees. You just pay for the card itself, and you don't have to continue to pay based on use. Each card can transport 4 to 8 streams at a time, making it a dense solution. And you can also get send and receive. So you can send signals back and forth between one card on each end. We also provide some detailed monitoring stats, such as how many packets are dropped, how many have been recovered, and how many packets have been unrecovered. So SafeLink is IP only, no ASI. So before jumping out to the next section here, let's actually jump over to Dashboard, which is the control interface. And I want to take you through some of the settings of the encoder and then the decoder. So the encoder, this is the 9992 encoding product. If we go to the encoder mode, you can see we can run this in either single channel or multi-channel up to 3G. We also have the ability to select the compression if it's going to be HEVC, AVC, or MPEG-2. You can, if I do multi-channel, and hit apply, you can see I have now 4 encoders: encoder 1, encoder 2, encoder 3, and encoder 4. I click on encoder 1 and I can configure that encoder. My video bit rate, 4 megabits per second, I can take that up to 6 if I'd like, or 10, or whatever that might be. I can also start to add audio channels. So as I add audio channels, dynamically new tabs pop up. So encoder 1, audio channels 1 and 2. As I add the second, that second audio channel will go into that encoder 1 and 2. But then when I add the third, you'll notice that another tab pops up for 3 and 4. So now I'll have 4 channels of audio that I can configure. When I jump into that tab, I can select the group and also the channels. So if I wanted to encode 4 channels, I would have group 1, channels 1 and 2 on this PID. And on the audio channel 2, I would have group 1, channels 3 and 4. Then I have my selection of my different audio capable on the card that are licensed for floating licenses. And as you can see, I can do MPEG 1 layer 2, ACC, Dolby, and I can, if I wanted to do, let's say, Dolby surround, Dolby AC3 instead of stereo, I'm looking for surround, and I can just configure my card to select those settings. So I just hit apply on that, and then I can go over to my second card here, and I want group 2, channels 1 and 2, Dolby 5.1, and group 2, channels 3 and 4, Dolby 5.1. And so on and so forth. I could add on more. If I had additional audio pairs, I can add them on as different services, and they would all be encoded and sent in this fashion. So other things that I can do, I can actually jump into the advanced settings, and I can get fancy. I can control the GOP structure, as many B frames, what the delay is through the card, and enable closed captions. This is probably going to be something, especially in the US, that people are very interested in. AFD, SCSI insertions. We can pass the SCSI insertions. And you can also customize the PIDs as you have them. And then the output. So right now this card is set up for ASI IP streaming. If I wanted to select RIST, I just select RIST from the protocol option. I can ask to drop null packets. I can set this up for protocol RIST. And then I get to control my NAC window, which is kind of what the card is looking for from the decoder in terms of delay, the buffer size, things of that nature. And I have up to 4 streams, independent streams, that I can send out to different devices with all their own different IP ports. So from one encoder channel, I can send over 2 different discrete networks and receive those from one encoder channel into my decoder to do the hit list packet switching. Now just jumping over then into the decoder, you'll see a similar type layout where we have the decoder mode, and again you can either do single channel or dual. In our decoder channel, you select unicast or multicast, what the port is, the resolution, input resolution, any kind of scaling, the delay in the decoder, and then the number of audio channels. And again, for this, I can add in support for, let's say I wanted to do 8 channels of audio. I can do that. And then in my audio routing, I don't have anything coming into this, but I would just simply select where I wanted to decode those audio channels. Group 1 pair 2 comes from audio 1, for example. And if I go over to my status on the left, I can go into my decoder 1, audio, and I can see that I actually don't have any audio present right now, but I could decode up to the 16 channels if I had those coming in on this card. And it will decode, depending on your licensing. So going back to my decoder here, if I look at my, setting up the network, I could also set up RIST and the ability to do hitless switching in this card. But jumping back into the PowerPoint presentation here, that's just a quick overview of the cards right now and the different feature sets. If you'd like more in depth on anything at any time, just reach out to our team and we can be happy to provide a deeper dive. So moving along, we're getting into now the rest of our product line, which deals with end-to-end 12G SDI workflows. So this slide here represents just all the different features and functions we have in 12 gig. So from acquisition, we can come in, we can take a signal, we can DA it to a patch panel, or we can even take it over fiber to a second production location, and then also put it forth into a router. As we mentioned earlier, we have a small 12G SDI router that could then distribute signals to a multi-viewer or your 4K processing until you finally go to the encoder card. The 9992 has 12G SDI inputs going over your telco link to your decoder, and then potentially to another branding solution with our we call it our DSP edition, that provides all the different audio loudness leveling products that we and logo identification or insertion that we talked about earlier. So the multi-viewer, it's capable of 2 dual outputs and 34 inputs. It has the ability to also output HDMI 2.0 so that you can drive either a consumer monitor or into a router. We can have audio meters on either side. We can do tallies and UMDs. With all the inputs being 12 gig SDI, perfect for 4K or 8K environments. Also, if you are still in 1.5, it's great because you can have more inputs into the multi-view and have a better density and cost per input. So again, stepping into the controls a little bit here within the dashboard, I have a multi-view card here for us to look at. So the first thing to notice is that you have to assign, if you're in the dual mode, you have to assign the number of pips, input pips, to each screen that you're outputting towards. So you have a total of 18 pips or images. So if we wanted to spread them evenly, we could do that. Or if I wanted to go 12 on one side and 4 on another, we could do that as well. I'll just bump this up to 16 even on one side. We have the ability to mix and match. On the input status, you can see all the inputs to the card. It'll tell you the resolution of the input and the timing, what the frame rate is. Then once you've assigned your pips, you go to the input video routing, make sure they're all routed correctly, and go to the screen layout. So we can select either between, we actually have in this firmware build 4 different screens, but we'd only have 2 of them active right now. We can select the output resolution, and we can also have some templates. So if I just wanted to do an easy 4x4, I can apply that template on screen 1. As we remember, screen 1 had 12 pips and screen 2 had 4 pips. And then for screen 2, we can do a quick 2x2 and apply that. Or we can just customize. So if we wanted to go to screen 1 and we started out with our 4x4, but let's see here, 4x4, but we wanted to show these controls for additional customization. We can actually, pip by pip. So right now we're controlling pip 1. We can take that pip and we can move it horizontally, vertically, up and down. We would, however we like. We can also control the size of the pip, and then the border controls is another customization. The width and the color, the opacity, and then UMDs again for per screen and per pip. We can control what the UMD would look like if it's following a protocol, or if it's enable tallies, what we want that to look like. Audio meters, you can enable audio meters and control how wide they are, how many of them there are. If we want 16, or maybe we only want 8 audio meters. If there's a split right between 4 and 5, or if we want to make that split between 7 and 8, or 5 and 6, we have that complete control there. So that's the control layout right now for the multi-viewer. Coming back to the presentation. So after the multi-viewer, we have our processing cards. So we have some new things to share about single path HDR productions. So this slide gives an overview of the complete end-to-end workflow, where you might have in a production environment a mix of HDR cameras and SDR cameras. We have a product 9904 that can come in and they can take that legacy equipment up to HD. Or maybe you have some server content that's coming in legacy, and that's also being upmapped to HD. Then from your switcher, you might want to share that HDR feed to another truck, but the other truck might be SDR, so that you can then go from HDR to SDR. And then finally, you might need to share that content with a provider at the other end. But in order to save on transmission, what you can actually do is you can convert that to SDR and include some metadata with that to transport it over to our decoder, which can then break it back out and reconvert it up to HDR, pristine HDR signal and good looking SDR signal, so that they can produce both HDR and SDR content. So we have kind of this complete workflow. So we have also a new ordering option. So before we had 2 different ordering options for the HDR to SDR and SDR to HDR, HDR to SDR, both of those directions. We're now adding a third, what we're calling the SL HDR decode, which is the ability to take that metadata and regenerate the HDR from the SDR feed. And all of these options now are available for the same price under one header ordering option, the Plus HDR Technicolor, as all these are tool sets from Technicolor. And so ITM, SDR to HDR, that's great for ingesting legacy content because it has some intelligence behind what the changing lighting conditions would be for the show and what kind of temporal kind of transitions you have between those different automatic or intelligent adjustments. And then it also has a bright spot analysis, which will do things like, oftentimes in these conversions, you might drown out content on either extreme, just because you have these big areas of brightness and then maybe some other smaller speculars. And the bright spot analysis will help retain that detail in the smaller areas of light. An example could be a sporting event where you're looking to retain the golf ball in the sand pit or in the sky. There's also a powerful noise reducer in the ITM product that'll allow you to take 10 or 8-bit content and reduce some banding artifacts. The SL HDR encoder, as we said, can do HDR to SDR, but it can also do HDR to HDR conversions. So you can go from different formats like HLG to PQ or PQ to HLG. We also support Sony's S-Log3. The SL HDR1 is the metadata that would be transmitted for an SDR signal, and the SL HDR2 is transmitted for PQ HDR signals. And that transmission standard is being pushed out to consumer devices so that you can actually optimize the HDR content for that settings display capabilities. So some really exciting things that are happening there. Also, SL HDR1 is being implemented at the consumer level so that you can transport under ATSC 3.0 or any other transport mechanisms that would support SL HDR1. You can transport an SDR feed and still provide HDR signals to the consumers that have HDR sets. And lastly, here we're going to be supporting a new set of LUTs from BBC. So you can actually take just our static LUT generator and have these predefined LUTs by the BBC to convert from HDR to SDR and SDR to HDR without having to go to something that's maybe a little bit more dynamic and maybe a little bit more expensive for the budget. So with those things, not quite done yet. Just looking for my mouse here, and we're going to jump real quick into the dashboard once again. And I have a 9904 here provisioned with all these different options, just to give you a little taste of what that looks like. In the ITM tab, this is the SDR to HDR for legacy content. So you can select what your output would be, what the transfer curve will be, if that's PQ, HLG, or S-Log3. Your color space, if it's 709, which is usually the SDR color space, and range, which would usually be legal. Then if you're looking to keep legal, and then the peak luminance, which 1000 is usually a standard peak luminance on the output, but we can absolutely go all the way up to 2000 or lower luminance levels. Standard televisions today are at about 100 luminance or nits. And then the different modes. So we have preset, expert, and auto. A preset mode, you basically have brightness and contrast, and you can go to each one of these different ticks on the slider bar here to have a different, I think there's 27 or so pre-configured presets based upon these two features. You can do additional contrasts such as saturation or limiters on top of the preset mode. The expert mode will allow you to actually dial in what your different lighting conditions are. So with HDR, you have something called the midtones, which are kind of your standard lighting conditions. And then you have the highlights, which in HDR don't exist in SDR. And then you have your shadows, which again are at the opposite extreme of the spectrum and don't exist necessarily in SDR. So these set of controls here allow you to select those highlights, midtones, and shadows. They provide a mask that gives you a gray for the midtones, a black for the shadows, and a white for the highlights. And you can dial in your adjustments so that you can see on a frame-by-frame basis what those values would be, and then the unit will adjust the transform curves based upon those settings. So that takes a little bit more expertise. And then if you just want to set it up and forget it, we have an auto mode. So you just select auto, and then there are some fine-tuning adjustments that you can get into. For example, I've talked about those temporal filters, how fast we transition between the different scenes. So do you want the processor to jump over quickly or to give you a little bit more time to give it a more gradual transition? It'll be dependent on your content, so you can adjust these settings. The bright spot analysis that we talked about before with some settings, contrast, and also some saturation settings and sharpness adjustments. So as you can see, we have a lot of tools in this tool set for that. And then we talked a little bit more about the denoising filters, so you can play with your debanding, and you have a trade-off between quality and the banding, and then some other denoising features within different bands that we talked about before: the shadows and the highlights, the midtones. The SL HDR encoder again is the HDR to SDR conversion engine, and we can simply select what we call tone mapping. So this will be similar to the ITM page, except it's in the reverse. So you select your peak luminance of the input, if it's legal or full, your incoming OETF curve, which is just the PQ, HLG, or S-log3 again, and then your input color imagery, which is probably going to be 2020. We have this region of interest that allows you to basically zero in on the area of the screen you want to focus on. So if you have border graphics, we can ignore those. We can enable or disable that. And then your output settings pretty much is always going to be SDR, but you can select between legal and full. And then there's some other tuning, like if you wanted to adjust the lift, the gain, the saturations, the highlights, all those things are available. The SL HDR option gives you the SL HDR1 metadata, so that you can output and then rehydrate this system back to HDR downstream. And then the HDR OETF convert allows you to select your input settings and output settings, but if you'll notice here, the output settings are HDR. So you can do, for example, HLG to PQ or PQ to HLG, and you get similar set of tunings for this as well. In the decoder, it's very simple. So this would be a second card probably. You're sending something from the SL HDR encoder to the decoder, and you'd simply enable it, and then it'll come in and you can regenerate either the PQ or the S-log3 from the SDR signal. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have and see if anybody wants more detail on anything.